When talking about dangerous people, most imagine obvious figures: criminals, historical tyrants, aggressive or unstable individuals. But Carl Gustav Jung warned that true dangers rarely present themselves in such explicit forms. According to him, destructive personalities often hide behind masks of virtue, morality, and even spirituality. These are individuals who at first glance seem exemplary, confident, certain of their values, apparently guided by unshakable principles. However, behind this facade operates a devastating psychic mechanism. Jung observed that these people share a common characteristic: a systematic refusal to confront their own dark aspects, or their shadow. Instead of acknowledging their flaws, insecurities, and destructive impulses, they project them onto others. They create imaginary enemies, point fingers at the guilty, accuse the entire world of imperfection while simultaneously placing themselves in the role of innocent victims or enlightened heroes. This seemingly subtle process makes such personalities uniquely dangerous because they do not see themselves as agents of evil. On the contrary, they firmly believe they represent absolute good. For Jung, this type of total conviction is an alarming sign. Healthy individuals hesitate, feel guilt, struggle with moral dilemmas. Dangerous personalities, however, walk with a cold certainty, immune to internal conflict. They not only practice evil, but do so believing they are justified, whether by a cause, a faith, an ideology, or even a personal narrative of justice. When this absence of self-criticism combines with superficial charisma, the result is an individual who inspires trust while spreading destruction. Jung referred to this state as possession by the shadow. When someone identifies so completely with their persona of goodness that they become blind to their own dark impulses, they become unconsciously dominated by them. And that is precisely why these people are unpredictable. They do not see themselves as manipulators but as saviors. They do not recognize flaws, only certainties. And it is at this point that they transform into real threats, whether within an intimate relationship, in positions of political power, or even in seemingly innocuous contexts of everyday life. The aim of this video is to reveal, based on Jung's analysis, 3 unmistakable signs that— First, and perhaps the most revealing sign of a genuinely dangerous personality. While most people can recognize, albeit with difficulty, their own flaws and contradictions, personalities dominated by the shadow do exactly the opposite. They expel any unwanted traits from themselves and see them only in others. It is as if they carry a distorted mirror, incapable of reflecting their own imperfections, but always ready to show in an inflated and caricatured manner the flaws of others. This mechanism is insidious because it creates an alternative reality. Imagine someone who constantly accuses others of being manipulative, dishonest, or cruel, but who never admits even the possibility of harboring those same impulses within themselves. To the eyes of a superficial observer, this person may even seem whole, a model of virtue denouncing the injustices of the world. But in practice, what is happening is a systematic projection. All the aspects they refuse to accept in themselves are pushed out onto neighbors, colleagues, partners, or even entire groups. Jung was incisive in answer to Job when he noted that even religious images can fall into this devastating error. Complete identification with the good, while all evil is pushed outside. This kind of absolute division not only distorts psychic reality, but also fuels fanaticism. The person who fully projects their shadow truly believes they are fighting against evil forces, when in fact, they are combating aspects of themselves that have become too intolerable to be recognized in practical life. This translates into well-known patterns. The coworker who never makes mistakes but constantly points out errors in others. The partner who positions themselves as a victim in every argument, even while clearly being responsible for part of the conflicts. The leader who builds their identity around the idea of fighting an external enemy, never admitting their own contradictions. Total projection not only corrodes personal relationships, but also creates fertile ground for social and political conflicts, as it transforms normal human differences into absolute moral battles. The most dangerous aspect, according to Jung, is that those who project in this way deeply believe in their version of reality. It is not a matter of conscious cynicism, but of psychic blindness.
Shame or regret, uncomfortable feelings, but absolutely necessary for human development. These emotions act as a natural brake, reminding us that our choices have consequences and that evil cannot be committed without inner resistance. Dangerous personalities, however, operate on a different level. They seem to navigate life with impenetrable certainty. When they hurt others, they do not hesitate. When they distort the truth, they are unshaken. When they make decisions that destroy other people, they show no remorse. This absence of moral conflict is not a sign of strength, but of psychological pathology. It is as if all critical faculties have been silenced, and the individual acts like a machine that automatically justifies its choices, no matter how destructive they may be. In The Undiscovered Self, Jung warns of the dangers of this condition when it extends to the collective. He describes how in times of political and social upheaval, individuals who already possess this internal coldness find fertile ground to thrive. They become leaders of movements, advocates of absolute ideologies. While most hesitate and reflect, these individuals seem to have all the answers ready, and it is precisely this unwavering confidence that inspires followers, even if the path they lead is one of destruction. On a personal level, this pattern is equally devastating. Relating to someone incapable of feeling moral conflict is like living in front of a mirror that always claims innocence. No matter what happens, this person will never waver, will never truly apologize, will never show the vulnerability that marks integral human beings. Instead, they will move forward with a steady gaze, convinced of their righteousness, even when all the facts prove otherwise. This psychological state is dangerous because there is no room for dialogue or transformation. The absence of hesitation becomes a kind of armor against reality. Among the signs described by Jung, perhaps none is as corrosive as the systematic inability to take responsibility. This trait does not manifest only in small excuses or an occasional deflection of blame. It constitutes the backbone of the identity of the dangerous personality. These individuals live in a constant state of rewriting reality. Regardless of what happens, they always emerge from their own narratives as wronged victims or goodness. Jung observed that this dynamic is extremely deceptive because, on the surface, many of these individuals appear sincere. They speak with conviction, cry in the face of accusations, and may seem emotionally shaken. But what is actually at play is an unconscious dramatization. The mask adjusts as needed, always ensuring that the final narrative absolves them. This ability to position themselves as victims or martyrs makes them even more dangerous. In practice, this trait generates vicious cycles in relationships. Romantic partners constantly find themselves feeling guilty for conflicts they did not create. Work teams destabilize in the face of colleagues who never acknowledge failures but present themselves as overwhelmed and wronged. This type of narrative is not just psychological defense. It is a mechanism of power. And the most unsettling point is that the refusal to take responsibility does not eliminate the shadow. It only makes it more dangerous. The repressed and projected evil does not disappear. It accumulates, strengthens, and returns in increasingly distorted forms. When reality is constantly rewritten, there is no space for learning, only for the compulsive repetition of increasingly severe mistakes. Jung described this process as an advanced stage of shadow possession, where the individual becomes a slave to their own persona. One of Jung's most unsettling insights is that truly dangerous personalities do not present themselves to the world as monsters, but as seemingly normal people, often even admired. He observed that these individuals learn to wear a socially accepted mask, a disguise of kindness, charisma, and virtue that deceives even the most attentive. This mask, which Jung called the persona, functions like a carefully crafted outfit to navigate human interaction. However, when used to hide a complete refusal to integrate one's own shadow, it ceases to be merely a social role and becomes an instrument of manipulation. The impact of this is profound because it makes these personalities extremely difficult to identify. While the unstable or openly aggressive individual arouses immediate suspicion, the one who masters the art of the mask goes unnoticed. It could be the leader who inspires impassioned speeches of morality. The central problem, according to Jung, is that this ability to simulate normality prevents any preventive intervention. Society, by valuing appearances of virtue and success, ends up rewarding precisely those who best know how to hide their shadow. According to Jung, the most dangerous stage of possession by the shadow occurs when the refusal to take responsibility and the ability to wear a mask of virtue merge into something even more radical: moral fanaticism. At this point, the person no longer merely presents themselves as someone just or kind. They absolutely believe that they are in fact the bearer of supreme truth. The conviction is so unshakable that any disagreement becomes a threat. Any criticism is interpreted as persecution, and any opposition must be eliminated in the name of a greater good. The danger here lies not only in the belief itself, but in the intensity with which it is lived. While an ordinary person still maintains a margin of doubt, the moral fanatic completely eliminates this possibility. They are unaware of acting on behalf of their own repressed shadow. They believe they are serving universal principles of justice, purity, or spirituality. Jung saw this as a kind of psychic blindness. The more someone identifies with the good, the more deeply they become enslaved to the unrecognized evil that operates in their unconscious. In The Undiscovered Self, Jung warned that on a collective scale, this mentality creates mass movements capable of dragging crowds into group psychologies dominated by irrational certainties. In everyday life, this pattern can be recognized in figures who turn morality into a weapon, who use discourses of ethical superiority to manipulate and silence, who present themselves as examples of righteousness while silently destroying everyone around them. The most disturbing thing is that these people truly believe in their own version of reality. They are not deliberately lying. They are completely dominated by the illusion of their own purity. Jung noted that this is the point at which the shadow becomes truly dangerous, not because it manifests as explicit violence, but because it presents itself disguised as goodness. The fanatic does not realize they are hurting. They do not recognize their own destructiveness, and therefore do not feel the need to stop.
Without guilt, and rewrites reality in a way that always keeps them in the role of innocent or hero. With each layer, manipulation becomes more sophisticated: projection, absence of conflict, refusal to take responsibility, the charming mask of normality, and finally, absolute moral fanaticism. This path shows how danger does not arise suddenly. It builds gradually, with each mechanism reinforcing the next, until the individual is merely a vehicle for the repressed shadow. For Jung, understanding these signs was not just an intellectual exercise, but a measure of psychic survival. For those who do not recognize such patterns outside and within themselves, remain vulnerable to being manipulated by them, or worse yet, to becoming their unconscious bearer. And here lies the central point. This analysis serves above all as a mirror. We all carry a shadow,
And the greater risk is not its existence, but the refusal to acknowledge it. The true antidote against destructive personalities begins with a courage to look within and ask, where do I project? Where do I avoid taking responsibility? Where do I walk with certainties that prevent me from reflecting? These questions are not comfortable, but they are the only ones capable of protecting us from being dominated by the same mechanisms we criticize.